Hi, Dr. Lyle, and welcome to the Truth About Weight Loss Summit. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure, AJ. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always wouldn't be a summit without you. You know, Dr. Lyle, when it comes to weight loss, so many people are looking for a quick fix in the form of a pill, a potion, or a procedure. Is there a better way? And if so, what are the fundamentals of weight loss?
The fundamentals are to listen to every huckster out there, do it all, find out that every shortcut that you've heard is wrong, and then find us. That's the right way to do it. That's like, I don't know if anybody else has ever did this when they were a kid or something. That at some point in my life, I can't remember specifically, but I probably planned on cheating on an exam. And you figure out, you can put a little card up your sleeve or some such thing. And finally, by the time you get done with it, you're like, you know what, just study. Forget it. You know what I mean? That's it. All of this is way too much trouble. And that's how this is too. So, of course, everybody desperately wants a shortcut. Everybody wants something to be easy. But the truth is that there is one fundamental way to do this, and it's made up of sub-fundamentals. And if we skip those steps or try to step around them, then we are already sort of cheating the process, and we're going to wind up with a house that might be a halfway decent house, but it's got, one of its four pillars of its foundation is shaky. And so in a big rain, it's going to sink. And then what's going to happen? We're going to gain 30 pounds before we know it. So that's why we want to put things on an extremely solid foundation. I tell people we are in no rush to lose weight because we're only going to do it once. So that's the idea here. So we're going to do this one time, and we're going to do it right. And we may struggle with the steps with any foundation, with any fundamental process. There's a learning curve. And you can really see this in physical skill development. You watch a little kid, learning to play the piano or learning to shoot a basketball, and you watch them struggle and fumble and make all kinds of mistakes. And then you watch them respond to coaching, and then they have to practice. And during practice, they make all kinds of mistakes. And so if we had time-lapse photography or video, it would look seamless and like it was pretty easy. But if we actually had all of the videos of some kid struggling to be a good piano player, we will find out that they went through really quite a process. They became 100 times better. And I don't just pull that out of the sky. It turns out that when you go through the process of skill development, you literally are wrapping myelin sheath around neurons, and you are creating an insulated neural circuit, and that neural circuit will then make the capability of that motor skill, for example, be 100 times faster than it might have otherwise been. And so it can be both very, very fast and very, very accurate. That's going to be true with you, I don't know, chopping carrots, or putting dinner together. So if you've ever seen a real cook in a kitchen, it's actually remarkable to watch a real cook work. They've got an amazing amount of stuff going on in their head. They've got little clocks going on in their head with 5 different things that they've got on the fire. And they are, it's really a complicated procedure. So they didn't learn, they weren't born with that. They had to go through a tremendous learning curve, learning one fundamental at a time and slowly putting that thing together in order for them to pull that off. What we need to do is, we're not going to start with my friend Justina's fancy DrDougLisle carrot cake oatmeal or whatever it is. We're going to start out with oatmeal. Okay, we're believe it or not, embarrassing as this is to tell you, I didn't actually know how to cook oatmeal till my late 30s. I had never eaten oatmeal in the morning. I'd always eaten granola. And when I went to live in my late 30s with Alan Goldhammer's, I lived in his basement when we were working on the Pleasure Trap. I watched Jennifer cook oatmeal, and I was sort of fascinated by this, like, oh, is it really that simple? And then one day I did it myself, and then it became like it was really a boost in my self-confidence and independence that I didn't have to go to some restaurant, have them bring me oatmeal, that I could actually do it myself. I know this sounds absurd, but I'm just telling you the truth. So the truth is, it's never too late to learn, and it's also true that without the learning, we're not going to get there. So so weight loss has many fundamental components to it to do this right. It's an unnatural problem, and therefore a lot of the sub fundamentals or the little pieces to this don't come easily for people. So people are much better at, if they put any effort in, they're much better at learning to dance than they would ever be at learning to diet, because dancing is something that is inherently fun, and it's also you've got natural neural circuits for it. And if you can stand to actually listen to an instructor, and if you got people that are enthusiastic about learning, you will learn to be able to be a very good dancer pretty quickly, because it comes natural. You won't learn to be good at defending yourself from the lure of the pleasure trap, all the social pressure of everybody in the world trying to shove you into the pleasure trap, from the intimidation of the ego trap of your own expectations and everybody else's, being that if you tried to do this, you should be able to do this, and from a sort of punishing internal audience that gets disgusted with you when you fail, and the very high expectations that are generally unrealistic about how quickly and easily this problem will be solved. So these things there's a host of unnatural looking and unnatural subcomponents that aren't part of human natural history. You're not going to learn to do this the way you learn to dance. You're going to learn to do this, I don't know, maybe something that's, I'm trying to think of something that is kind of an unnatural thing to do. I think to some extent riding a bicycle is somewhat unnatural. You got to move the steering wheel to catch yourself from balancing, to losing your balance, etc. You have to push forward when that's very scary. When you're just learning this and you're feeling out of balance, you don't want to push forward. You want to stop. So there are some things about that learning to ride a bicycle is actually tricky. You also will learn usually the hard way that when you go through a puddle, you better not go through at an angle, because if there's been some algae forming in that little puddle for a while, that concrete underneath it can be very slick, and down you're going to go with the slightest provocation of any angle on that wheel. So little by little, you learn the mistakes, you learn where it is that you've got vulnerabilities, you have to put things together. But with some time, after a year or two, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid is pretty good at riding a bike, and they'll get better. And by the time they're 14, they're ridiculously good. So you give a kid 5 or 6 years on a bike, and they're going to be really good. You give somebody 5 or 6 years into this program, and you're going to be really good. But it's process. Be pretty darn good in a year, but you're not going to be as good as you're going to be in 5 years. And that's because there's a lot of little points to it. I've had people that have lost a lot of weight in this program, and they have been approached by others telling them, "Wow, you should have a TV show, or you should write a book about your experience." I've had this happen on a number of occasions. And my advice to these people has always been the same. Don't even think about it until you've reached a goal weight and sat there for at least 3 years. As much as you might pine for the limelight, as much as you might feel like this tremendous relief and desire to share this with the world, the truth of the matter is you've got a lot of learning to do still. Just because you've been up on that bicycle and haven't fallen off it for a while doesn't mean that you're a good writer. And if you bring a bunch of attention to yourself and try to take on the world and have hot lights on you, and you're going to tell your big story, you have no idea how hard life's going to get. And pretty soon you're going to be pinched for time and energy and organization. Then you're going to have emotional upset pushing you around, and now pretty soon we're in trouble. How many times does Oprah have to face this? So don't even think about doing anything other than getting to be an intermediate skill bike rider for the first 2, 3, 4 years. Then, then if you burn to share your story, please share your story. There's no end of the different personalities and ways that people have been successful, and so that this is a kind of story that needs to be told many times by many different people. They'll speak to different listeners. So, as my dad said, Doug, nobody wants to hear about what weight loss strategies from a borderline anorexic like you. So this was his way of letting me know when he was 70 years old, he could easily whip me in a fight, and that is true. So yeah, we're all different. We come to this journey differently. I didn't come to this journey as a client. I came to this journey as a counselor at True North Health Center and with the McDougall program, facing with each individual an individual set of problems for that individual, but also a similar set of problems from person to person, to where we could slowly start to put together what we recognize as the fundamentals of the problem. So we could talk about some of those fundamentals, AJ.
I would love to, because where does someone start?
Yes, I think we start with some important fundamental understandings of what is involved here. I think the main fundamental, there are a few, but the most fundamental thing that we need to understand is the principle of calorie density. And the most fundamental thing about calorie density is that there's been two things that have been removed from the food. And those two things are fiber and water. So when you're looking at corn oil, or somebody's got olive oil and they're pouring it all over their pan, and they're going to fry up a bunch of eggplant in it, and it's going to come out with little sponges that they think are healthy, vegan, fair, but really it's a little olive oil sponge. Okay? What they're missing is understanding that in the processing of what used to be a very unpalatable fruit, I guess it is called an olive, it went through a process by which the pure fat was extracted away from the water, the fiber, the vitamins, and the minerals, and the carbohydrate that was in there, and any protein. And what got isolated out was the most concentrated caloric source in that fruit, which was the fat. And so that's what all oils are, is they are pure fat. And pure fat, there's really 4 sources of calories for human beings in the world. There's protein, fat, carbohydrate, and alcohol. And those are 4 different types of chemicals. And each of those has a different amount of calorie density, or how many calories there are per cubic inch or teaspoon, or however you want to measure it. And so so essentially, if we toss out alcohol, because not a lot of people are eating alcohol, and even people that drink a glass of wine a night are really not eating very much alcohol. So the vast majority of the calories that anybody ever eats are going to be coming from protein, fat, and carbohydrate. These are your caloric macronutrients. There's 2 other macronutrients, fiber and water. So your natural diet consists of all 5. And obviously the first 3, protein, carbohydrate, and fat, those 3 things have the calories in them. The fiber and the water are things that go along with the life that was necessary to make the food. So you're going to have water inside a stalk of broccoli, or the broccoli would have died. And so, and you have to have fiber as part of the fibrous matrix that holds that plant together. So in animals, they don't have fiber, but they have water. And so there's a difference between eating steak and eating beef jerky, which all the water is now out of it, and the beef jerky is much higher calorie density than a piece of steak. So our ancestors ate diets that were very high in water and very high in fiber. There was no processing of the food with machines or through some unnatural process by which the fiber and the water were removed. And as a result of that, were altered. So there was no machines that had steel teeth that could grind, I don't know, seeds into powder. No possibility to do such a thing. So as a result, the food, the fiber was intact until you chewed it and your stomach would break it apart. And the water was intact in terms of you weren't eating foods that were dried. Now, our ancestors could have dried some food, and occasionally they would, but not very much, and it would have been dangerous to do so. If you lay food out there, I don't know, on a rock somewhere and let the sun dry it, don't expect the birds to ignore it. So that's not going to be a very smart move. So our ancestors didn't do very much of that. And so as a result, the food that they ate was full of water that would have naturally come with the food, and full of fiber that was intact. It wasn't ground up. And we've all seen pictures of, Native American women with stones in their hand and a little stone bowl and grinding up some grain. And when they got done grinding that grain, it probably wasn't ground up that well into fine powder. It was half ground up. So if you made anything that remotely resembled bread with it, it'd be pretty tough, and you'd be chewing through that fiber. That would feel like very, very healthy food because the fiber would largely be intact. So the foods that we eat today, two big things have been removed from them, which is fiber and water. And in doing so, the diets have become more concentrated because there's no calories in water and there's no calories in the fiber. And so if we have food that has 5 parts in it and we take out 2 parts, or we reduce those 2 parts, then the remaining 3 parts are going to need to be increased, because the satiation mechanisms of how the organism is going to work is it's largely going to work on the process of what we call stretch reception, which is essentially an assessment of, did we eat about the right amount of food? And so if we pulled away 2 parts of the food that have no calories in them, then we are going to fill in the digestive system until it feels satisfied with other food that has calories in it. And that's how we wind up with the calorie density of the food rising above natural levels. Reasonable speculation as to what the natural level of calorie density for humans has been. It's probably been somewhere between 500 and 700 calories a pound, typically throughout the natural history of humans. So in different places where people had to rely more on animal food and had less plant food around, the natives of Alaska, for example, their food might have been higher in calorie density, and probably was, than most of the people that were living near the equator. However, we can tell that the vast majority of humans on planet Earth have lived in temperate environments where there's been a great deal of plant food, and they ate a huge amount of plant food, and plant food dominated typically the caloric intake of humans. Didn't completely, people ate animal food, and they ate as much animal food as they could get. They had run a cost-benefit analysis on getting that animal food, and it wasn't easy. Obviously it's easy now, but it hasn't been easy. It's been a hassle. And so as a result, a lot of effort has gone into human beings securing large amounts of plant food for them to eat, to be consistent, to eat that every day, because hunts are chancy. And so as a result, the plant food that we're going to be eating isn't going to be processed. It's not going to have the oil squeezed out of it and concentrated. They're not going to be frying carrots in oil. It's not going to happen. They're not going to be frying noodles, bean noodles. You're like, well, why would anybody ever fry carrots in oil? Well, just go to your local Chinese restaurant and look for all the little vegetables in there, and then a bunch of chow mein. And that chow mein, those sprouts are little noodles, or little sponges. The noodles are obviously been extruded through a process of grinding up a cereal grain like wheat or whatever they make out of it, and they've made it into essentially a spaghetti. And then when they cook that, it can soak up a tremendous amount of oil. So, and what do we do when we do that? We vastly increase the calorie density of the food. So if we were to look just generally across foods, we would find the following type of thing. we would find that raw salad vegetables are about 100 calories a pound. Things like lettuce and oh, I don't know, bell peppers and things like that. As we go to vegetables, things like broccoli and cauliflower and carrots and so forth, those are roughly about 200 calories a pound. We go to fruits, they're about 300 calories a pound. And then we're going to go to between 300 and 500 calories a pound. We're going to go to what we're going to call the wet starches. I put that word in there in a way that Dr. McDougall hasn't, just because him not emphasizing that, just because he just didn't happen to pay attention to that problem or just considered it to be not worthy of mentioning. By him not mentioning that, I've fielded 1,000 phone calls. I fielded 1,000 phone calls because people say, I'm eating a starch-based diet and yet I'm 25 pounds overweight. What's going on? And I know everything. I've read all the books. And if there's one thing I know about Chef AJ's people, they've read a lot of books and they've listened to a lot of stuff. And I'm amazed at how many times when I say wet starch, it's like, first time they heard that, it's like, well, you've been listening to Dr. McDougall, but you haven't been listening to me because I've mentioned it many times. Wet starch. The starches that our ancestors ate were wet. So a baked potato is wet. When you cook it, open it up. It's steaming. Okay? Beans, you're not going to eat them dried. You're going to eat them wet. You're going to cook them. They're going to absorb water. They're wet. Rice, wet. Okay? So rice, beans, potatoes, oats. You're not going to eat these things dry. If you eat rice cakes, you ate something that was wet and then we dried it out. And what happens when we dry it out? We reduce the natural amount of water that would have been in that food, and we wind up with a food that's now 14, 15, 16, 1700 calories a pound, depending upon just how dry it is and what else they've added to it. But just straight old rice cakes are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 1600 calories a pound. Now, remember I said that our ancestors ate a diet on average about 500 to 700 calories a pound, something in that range. So anything that is significantly higher than that should raise your eyebrow. Okay, so wild game typically is probably 800 calories a pound or maybe a bit less. So that's kind of interesting. It's not that far out of line with the average calorie density of the human diet. So it's a little higher. So I would say not a bad guess for the average calorie density of the human diet might have been 600 calories a pound. So if you had wild game up there at 800 calories a pound and it was 25% of your calories, then that meant that the rest of your diet could be safely down around 500 calories a pound. So that's kind of interesting. So obviously a bunch of your starches, rice, for example, 500 calories a pound, beans, 400 calories a pound. So if we're going to be eating a bunch of rice and beans and potatoes, and let's suppose we're modern day vegans and we understand we don't have to eat meat, how on earth are we going to get our calorie density up as high as 600 calories a pound if we're also eating fruit at 300, some vegetables at 200, and some salad vegetables at 100? We're going to be drifting down. And so you can kind of sniff this, because if we try to eat a diet that is exclusively ultimate true north diet, is going to be basically fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and nuts and seeds, whole grains and starches and nuts and seeds. So Alan throws that in at the end, the nuts and seeds. The nuts and seeds are going to comprise extremely high calorie density food at 2,500 calories a pound that is going to slightly spike up the average. If we eat a little bit of it, it's going to move us back into the 500 to 600 calorie pound range. Now, the weight loss. So let's look now. So now that we see sort of the huge range of calorie densities, we go up through animal flesh at 800. The next stop on the chain, there isn't any natural food until we're going to get all the way to honey. So a honey is going to be 1,800 calories a pound, and then the next stop after that's going to be nuts and seeds that are going to be about 2,500 calories a pound. Processed food, folks, almost all of it starts at around 1,000 calories a pound and moves its way past 3,000. So one processed food after the next. For example, the oatmeal that you would eat naturally that would be wet, that would be 325 calories a pound. If we make bread with it, that bread's going to be about 1,600 calories a pound. So we're going to increase the calorie density of the oatmeal by a factor of 4 or 5 by drying it out. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. If we crackers, cookies, all that sort of stuff, all of that is going to take a wet starch and it's going to dry it out. We use, if we take animal products like milk, which is obviously not a natural food, but human beings can eat it. That's going to be a super rich food. And if we have a dried out version of that, a la cheese, it's going to be 1,700 calories a pound. So as we do things to make foods unnatural, they're going to get very high in calorie density. And as they get very high in calorie density, you can see that we're going to be moving from 500 calories a pound, 600 calories a pound on average, to 700 calories a pound, and then pretty soon we're going to be at 800 calories a pound. It's not going to be hard to get to 800 calories a pound when we start adding Fritos to the food and string cheese. So when if I'm walking someplace and I'm seeing a bunch of school children and I'm seeing them eat Fritos and string cheese, and I know their mothers think that they're doing a good job because they think that those are healthy snacks. Those are, essentially 1,700 calorie a pound food. So it's no surprise that these kids are overweight. Why? Because they were designed to eat a diet of between 500, 600, maybe 700 calories a pound, and instead their lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, the bread is 1,700 calories a pound or so, the peanut butter is 2,500 calories a pound, the jelly is 2,000 calories a pound or 1,700 calories a pound, and the Fritos are 2,000 calories a pound, and the string cheese is 1,700 calories a pound. And then there's apple slices in there, mercifully down at 300 calories a pound. By the time we're done with that peanut butter sandwich, string cheese, Fritos, look where we are. We're at 1,500 calories, 1,800 calories a pound, for God's sakes. We are 2 times the calorie density or 3 times the calorie density that organism was designed for. Quite frankly, it's a miracle. It is a miracle that human beings aren't fatter than they are. When I see what people eat, when I see the calorie density of what they eat, I am astounded that they are not in worse shape. Okay, so now, does that mean I'm disgusted with them? No. These are just creatures that are designed by nature to eat the richest food in the environment, which is marking another major shift now in our discussion. So the first fundamental that we see, and we can look at it, and it's relatively simple, but there's a lot of knowledge in there. It's the understanding of calorie density. It's understanding that our nervous system essentially knows how much the right amount to eat through satiation mechanisms that are largely dependent upon what is the physical size and weight of the food. And the physical size and weight of the food it needs to average something that remotely resembles a big scoop of rice. So some of the food is going to be richer than that rice, and some of the food is going to be less rich than that rice. So if you had a big scoop of rice and you had some toasted almonds on the top of it, and then you also had some vegetables cut up in it, then you would on average be right in the middle. Okay, and so it'd be like, okay, well, a little bit of the diet's richer, some of the diet's less rich, and that's sort of in the middle, and there we are. Okay, that's the kind of diet that our ancestors ate. Nowhere in the natural history of this species was that rice fried in oil. Nowhere. Okay? So there's nowhere where that's happening. If that rice is fried in oil, that oil is pure fat, which is the most concentrated calories that there are, fat being 4,000 calories a pound. Notice that's about 8 times more concentrated than the diet that a human should be aiming at. Pure protein and pure carbohydrate are about 1,800 calories a pound each, so they're extremely similar chemically. So you can see that in their pure form, the calories that human beings eat, the macronutrients are designed, obviously, to be heavily diluted by water and fiber. If you had 1 part fat and 1/3 of a pound of fat and 1/3 of a pound of protein and 1/3 of a pound of carbohydrate, and that was your 1 pound of food that you ate, there was equal parts of each of those 3. The pound of fat would be 1,333 calories. The pound of carbohydrate and a pound of protein would each be 600. And so you'd have 2,500 calories in that meal, whatever it looked like, and you'd have 1 pound of food, and the organism is not going to be the slightest bit happy with 1 pound of food a day. It's going to be happy with 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of food a day. Very typically might be on the order of 4 pounds. A little bit bigger person might be 5 or 6 pounds. A little bit smaller person might be 3 to 4 pounds. But you can see that no way would a human being eat a diet that would be 1/3 protein, 1/3 carbohydrate, and 1/3 fat. No way. Those being the 3 macronutrients. If you made it, just mostly protein and mostly carbohydrate and a little bit of fat, doesn't matter. If you made it 80%, 40% protein, 40% carbohydrate, and 20% fat, it's still a disaster. So we're still going to be over 2,000 calories, and we only ate 1 pound of food, and you're not going to eat 1 pound of food. So we see that the vast majority of what the materials are designed to be is fiber and water. So people are always looking for the deficiencies in the human diet. They're looking for vitamin this, mineral that, phytochemical this, the importance of eating this or that thing for this or that health problem. Yeah, you're missing the point. There are 2 primary deficiencies that are at the root of almost all preventable health problems: fiber and water. Problems that are fundamental to excess weight and therefore type 2 diabetes and all kinds of associated problems with human health, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and then everything else that follows along that chain. This is as a result of dietary excesses. Those dietary excesses take place not because people are gluttons, but it's taking place because their diets are deficient. They have dietary deficiencies, okay? And if I were to tell them that, oh, you're deficient of this or that macronutrient, and it's purple, and you've got to get it in this, blueberries, then everybody'd be all excited. And everybody's all excited, looking around for some nutrient deficiency that's causing me to eat more than I should be eating because I'm trying to find my way to solve that deficiency. Yeah, nice concept, beautiful, artistic, very palatable psychologically, no pun intended, but it's BS. That is not what's going on. Your nervous system is not searching for some magic thing. It's searching for satiation behind the physical weight inside your body when you eat. And you're going to eat repeatedly throughout the day, and it's going to be seeking a set of neurological activity that takes place when there's been a sufficient amount of food by weight and volume. And if your diet is desiccated, if it has been dried out, and and we have oil in the diet that is essentially corn minus the water, the fiber, the vitamins, the minerals, the carbohydrate, and the protein, and we've taken that corn and we've isolated it down into the oil. We now essentially, however it is that we've done this, we've got a cracker. So we had what was once a wet carbohydrate, and now it's a dried carbohydrate. So now, and the cracker is a cracker. Why? It's also had its fiber damaged. And so now it's coming in a form that carbohydrate wasn't ever supposed to come in. Not to mention it's salted up to make it hyperpalatable. So what we do with the diet is we remove 2 of the 3 macronutrients, or we reduce them dramatically. We remove the fiber and the water. And when you remove the fiber and the water, you make it inevitable that that organism is going to systematically overeat. Okay? So when people come to me and they're trying to figure out why am I just eating so much? I sabotage myself. I know that I eat too much. I just can't seem to stop myself. Well, the truth is that you do stop yourself, or you wouldn't have stopped to pick up the phone to call me. So of course you stop yourself. Okay? You don't eat so much that you then go to the toilet and have to throw up half of it 20 minutes later. That isn't happening. Okay? So in fact, you eat a very reasonable amount of food. Oh no, Dr. Lisle, you should see how much I eat. I don't really care. I know it's not too much. The problem is, what are you eating? So what are you eating becomes the issue. How many calories are you eating? And now it comes down to, are we eating foods that have been fundamentally unnaturally altered? If we do, then that becomes the fundamental root of the problem that we have. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, all weight problems, other than few minor, unusual, physiological, damaged, or genetically bizarre situations, they come down to a very simple issue: that people are eating a diet that is missing a full complement of two macronutrients, water and fiber. That's it. So when I ask a person, what are you eating? By the way, for those of you that call me, of which there have been thousands, I can tell that I know when you're lying and when you're telling the truth. People don't know. They don't know I'm looking at Chef AJ, so we have our own eye contact and fun going on while this is happening. Yes, I know when you're lying and you're telling the truth. And now I'll tell you, remember that thing I said about cheating on an exam? I'm going to now tell you how to cheat, how to fool me. But in learning how to fool me, you'll learn that you may not need to call, because then you'll learn the lesson, because you'll know what I'm going to say. So this is how I know when people are lying and when they're telling the truth. When I say, tell me what it is that you eat, say, over the last month, just tell me all the kinds of things that you eat real typically, everything. I want to hear the whole story. I hear hemming and hawing as their mind goes through their memories, and they're remembering the pizza that they just ate, and they're remembering the crackers and the cookies, and they can't say those. And as their mind sifts through trying to find what the story is, they leak out little things that they know that are legal. That's how I know. Okay, let me tell you what it sounds like when I'm talking to somebody that's doing a really good job. Well, what I do in the morning is I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and then at lunch I do this, and this, and this, and this, and then at dinner I do this, and this, and this, and then my problem is I cram a bunch of rich food that's in the pantry at night. Got it. We know what the problem is. The first person, we have a much bigger problem. Why? Because they're a rookie. They're just learning how to ride the bicycle. They haven't done a lot of the homework and gone through a lot of the steps. My second person is an advanced player. They're a pretty good bike rider, but they're still running into situations where they fall off the bike. Okay, and that's okay. It's a tougher course. So they get through a lot of the obstacle course all day long, but then they run into trouble at the end. And we're going to wind up now with a final look at some fundamentals. The people are searching for why it is, once they even learn this, why do I do this? Why do I, quote, sabotage myself? Why do I know what to do, but why am I not doing it? There are pieces to this. There's several pieces of it, and some of them are pretty complicated. So on this summit, one of the things that I'm happy about is a colleague of mine, Justina Fries, is going to do a very complicated, and you may hear her before you hear me, but her presentation is a terrific presentation of going through some of the deeper psychological dilemmas that go through the pleasure trap and the ego trap and navigating those problems. So that's a more advanced level sort of examination of some problems that are really never discussed anywhere outside of steam dynamics. So these are not concepts that are well understood in the outside world. So this is sort of Chef AJ territory and steam dynamics. Jen Hawk and I This is sort of advanced pleasure trap analysis. But there are other fundamentals. So there are fundamentals that essentially we need to understand that you are not designed to be in the world as it exists. You are not designed for trying to consistently go against the instincts that are embedded in you, that are encouraging you and evaluating the food environment by essentially the caloric density. Remember that you have two constraints really on your life as a biological entity. Those two constraints are time and energy. Each creature, each organism that's alive, whether it's a redwood tree or it's a fruit fly, they have a limited lifespan. And in that limited lifespan, what they do is there's processes of life that require time and energy to accomplish them. We're not going to be worried too much about plants. We're going to be worried now. We're going to put plants aside for the moment and just look at animals. What animals have to do is they have to make choices. They have to make decisions. And what they're trying to do is they're essentially trying to utilize the two things that they have been gifted, which is time and energy. They can transform energy into movement, which will put them in a position biologically to put them at a biological advantage for survival and reproduction. That's what they do. So all life is the expenditure of time and energy. That's it. That's what it is. And so you can imagine that that animals get very good at figuring out how to spend their time and energy for biological success. So, for example, you're going to find that throughout nature, predators are not going to go after healthy, strong prey. Why? Because it's a waste of time and energy. Don't do it. Okay. Go after the weak, the slow, the isolated, the injured, the young. That's the right way to do it, because otherwise you are wasting precious time and energy. Okay, so if you're wasteful of your time and energy, you may be like a person who's in the middle of a construction project and you decide, like MC Hammer, to build, a really fancy wall, an entranceway, and big fountains and everything else. And it turns out a quarter of the way through, you're broke. You're out of business. You got to walk away from the whole thing. If you're an animal and you are squander your time and energy by, as a predator, chasing around the healthiest, gazelle on the savannah, you're going to be a dead cheetah before too long. You're only going to get a quarter of the time that you would have gotten because you made a terrible mistake by not taking the easiest low-hanging fruit that there was. Your job is to save time and energy. Well, what do you think the food environment that you have is? The food environment is all about saving you time and energy. It's about fast food, driving through things. It's about opening up a bag of chips. And so suddenly we've got, a 10-ounce bag of chips there that's been fried in oil, and it's crispy, and it's salty, and it tastes really good. And it's 2,500 calories a pound. So in this bag of chips, we got 1,300 calories, and it takes almost no energy to get to it. And it only took a couple of bucks. So we were able to earn it in almost no time. And it's like, oh my God. Well, and the crispiness tells our brain, our Stone Age brain, that it's fresh in the way that a crisp apple would. So the whole thing has been brilliantly engineered to get us to consume it. Why would we push that away when it's 2,000 calories a pound and reach for the carrots that are 200? Why would we do that? That would be biologically suicide to have neural circuits that would do that. And yet that's exactly what this program involves. This program involves getting on top of that, essentially this delusion that the richest food is actually the best thing for you. That has been true for more than 1 billion years. And now suddenly it's no longer true. So obviously, commercial interests in the competition of the food environment has led them to try to essentially experiment and figure out the motivational structure of animals if they're selling pet food, or humans if they're selling human food. And what that has meant is do what? Get the food more concentrated. And how are we going to do that? We're going to get rid of the fiber in the water. Okay? So we're going to get rid of, that's what a grocery store is, folks, by the way. That's just rack after rack after rack of food where the fiber and water is gone. That's what the grocery store is. The only fiber and water that's in the food anywhere is in the produce department. Okay? So God knows that's not very much of the stuff that people buy there. So, so the fundamentals of your biology are pushing you towards the easiest movements possible, the least time expenditure in preparing the food, and also the highest calorie density that you're going to get out of it. That's going to be a modern American cheeseburger and a chocolate shake and French fries. Okay? You're going to see some other things about that a lot of that food is going to be processed to the point where you don't have to chew it very hard. It's going to be really easy to eat. That's going to be because you don't like to expend the energy of any significant chewing. Alan and I, when a new employee would come to True North Health Center and we take them out to lunch and we take them out to a salad bar restaurant and we would watch them eat. These poor young people, they were like so enthusiastic and they believed and they were coming to spend part of their life with us to learn from us. And of course, they, like normal, reasonable people, they weren't necessarily the healthiest eaters. And sometimes they were, but usually they weren't. And we could tell that in one salad bar lunch. And that is, even though, we put them in line first, so they don't get to copy what we do. But the point is that chewing through a big salad, if you're not used to chewing through a big salad, is not something that most people want to do. They don't want to work their jaws that hard. Energy conservation, it'd be like tiring to a lot of people because their jaws aren't in very good shape because they're not used to chewing the way our ancestors did. Anyway, so a fundamental, and this is going to circle back around to the most important fundamental that we've identified in this whole thing. So the first fundamental is obviously whole natural food has its intact water and fiber in it, and therefore doesn't create the deficiency of water and fiber that leads inexorably to the overconsumption of calories in a diet, which causes excess weight to be gained. That's true whether we're a goldfish or a human. The second thing, the second fundamental is you were designed by nature for an environment where this rich food didn't exist. So therefore, the solution is put yourself back in the environment for which you were designed. If you try to override your own biology, you're asking for trouble. Okay? It's very difficult to do that. So the most important fundamental that we have identified over the years is you have to have a clean environment. If you don't have a clean environment, that your nervous system is going to be in cognitive dissonance because neural circuits are going to be firing, telling you, go save a bunch of time and energy. It's right there in the Pop-Tarts. They're right there on the second shelf in the pantry. There they are, 2,000 calories a pound. That is a way better deal than whatever dream you're trying to dream up that's down there at 300 or 400 calories a pound. What are you trying to sell me on that for? A little bean and potato soup with some corn in there and some nice seasoning that we had last night and that it's saved and it's in the refrigerator. Don't even try to sell me on that. That's 400 calories a pound. What do I want with that when I've got 2,000 calorie a pound Pop-Tarts in the thing? It's 5 to 1. Yeah. So that's the fundamental problem. So the most important fundamental is getting disciplined about getting your environment clean. I don't expect anybody that is beginning the journey or even early in the journey to do this well. They've got negotiations with family members. That's a whole other problem. They have their own their own memory systems remind them when they're in the store of what it is that they want to buy. And then it leads them over to the grocery where it's 2,000 calories a pound, and we put it in the cart, and we wind up toting it home. And it's not because it's a habit, it's because it's a cost-benefit analysis, which is all a habit is. Okay, so habits are have a dream-like analysis in modern psychology that defies all logic. It's as if it's something magical that if we just start it, it'll keep going. No, it's all a habit is that we have run a cost-benefit analysis and arrived at a certain course of action is sufficiently profitable. It's the best option that we have. And so we do it over and over. And guess what? When we do things that are healthfully supportive over and over, we get better at them because we go up the learning curves. And therefore, the cost of doing them drops. That's why now I have oatmeal in the morning, because now I'm good at it. I know I don't measure it out. I can do it with my eyeballs. And I put it in a tall enough cup. I put it in there and I put the right amount of water in, and I hit the button, and I know that it's going to be done in 1:45. So it takes me 1:40. I'm super lazy. So I'm going to use a microwave, then it's done. Now I didn't do that 20 years ago, but now I know how to do it. And so I'm up the learning curve. And by being up the learning curve, the cost of me producing that is less, and therefore it continues in my behavioral repertoire. It keeps getting selected. So cleaning up your environment, understanding that we're not searching for magic components to food, but we are searching to get rid of things that have been processed, that are unnatural, therefore they're laden with oil, or they're laden with dry foods of some kind, foods that have been dried out, whether they're oil or cheese or crackers or beef jerky or whatever process has unnaturally led to a destruction of fiber or the removal of water. Those two things will drive the calorie density of the diet to be too high for the organism in order to appropriately balance its intake. And the creature, whether it's a goldfish or a lizard or a Komodo dragon or a horse or a human, will start to systematically overeat and have excess fat stores. The solution is not to give it a lobotomy. The solution is not to give it a drug. The solution is not to cut out half of its stomach. The solution is not to have it run on a little exercise wheel till it dies. No, the solution is to reintroduce into its environment the natural foods that it was designed for, and make it very difficult and a tremendous hassle to get over to the foods that are unnaturally rich. That is the story. And if you set those things up as well as you can, don't expect them to be easy. Don't expect yourself not to fall and stumble 100 times, because of course you will. That's not a problem. Every kid learning to play the piano or riding a bike has had to make many mistakes in order to get these skills together. And so will we all, okay? But if you do this, this is the story. Anybody that's telling you that there's some shortcut, quick and easy way around this is somebody that doesn't have any success with their clients. They're not telling the truth. Doing this properly is a journey. It's a journey that can really use a lot of community if you're somebody that can really use support. It requires experiments in discipline, telling ourselves we're going to give this thing a try and see how it looks. Give us the experience of experiencing the fact that cost-benefit analysis turned out pretty well. Okay, it wasn't as bad or tough or difficult or self-denying as we thought. We managed to get through the night without cramming a bunch of crap, and we could do it the next day and then the next day. So this process of getting these, it's a little bit like learning to juggle. That, learning to juggle, by the time you juggle 3, it's a little tricky, but after you've done it for a while, it's easy. And then, even when you get stressed, you don't lose it. Okay? And that becomes the skills of a more intermediate player. So these are some of the big stories, and the other things that that people can look at. There's many other little, what do you call it, nuances of all of these things that we can look at. But the fundamental issues are that our environment is not what we were designed for, and it requires a relentless focus on understanding of what the fundamental change has been, and to make sure that we keep focused there. As I tell people, if you are looking at your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and you don't see a pile of wet starch there somewhere, you're in trouble. Okay? When I go into a restaurant, I'm thinking, where's there a pile of wet starch in here? Because if there's no pile of wet starch, I'm walking out of here. Okay? There has to be a pile of wet starch in there somewhere, or it's no place for us to be. And that was always the case. Okay, AJ, that's good for now.
Dr. Lisle, would you mind if I asked you a few questions on some of the things you said? I took 8 pages of notes, literally, but there's a few things. Would you mind clarifying?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. And now the first one, it's probably going to sound like a stupid question, but I have been asked this before, so I'd like you to answer it. And I totally understand what you said about fiber and water. They have 0 calories. But if they have 0 calories, how come when they're removed from the food increases in caloric density?
I would say that the following is the case. Remember, we've all had Coca-Cola in our lives, and we've all had Coca-Cola with a straw. And we know at some point we sat talking to our friends in some place where they had Coca-Cola in a glass, and we had a straw in it, and there was ice on the top, and the ice was melting, and it was putting water into the drink. And in fact, I believe because probably the sugar and the dye in the Coca-Cola make that water more dense, I think the clear water's floating on the top, sitting under that ice. And we know what it's like to take the straw and take it down, in an angle to where if you take some of that, it doesn't have very much Coke syrup in it. And therefore it doesn't taste very good because it doesn't have very much sugar. And we know what it feels like to dip it down deeper into where there's higher concentration of sugar, and now it tastes much sweeter. We know what that's like, okay? That is what rich food is. Rich food is like rich Coke syrup. It's laden with calories. We know what happens as we put more water and less Coke syrup in it, the density of how much sugar is in that fluid is reduced. The natural food supply was very diluted in terms of its calories. That's what potatoes taste like. That's what apples taste like. Apples don't taste like chocolate. They just don't, okay? They have some similar characteristics. They're both sweet, but one of them is 3,000 calories a pound and one of them is 300. And the most fundamental difference between those two, being a factor of 10 in energy concentration, is that you don't see any water in that chocolate. Okay? There's no water in there, and there's no fiber in there. So you're not crunching through anything. It's just pure fat and sugar. So when you pull the water and fiber, if we were to pull the water and fiber out of the apple, AJ, and what we have left, there's actually a tiny bit of fat in it. Believe it or not, you could synthesize apple oil. I don't know that anybody has, they probably have, but you could. But more importantly, you could pull sugar out of it. And so if you pulled the sugar out of the apple and dried it out, it would crystallize. It would just be like table sugar. It would have a little scent to it that would be like an apple. But that apple sugar that could sit in a jar would be about 1,800 calories a pound, where the apple is only 300 calories a pound because we've removed the fiber and the water. Okay, so essentially the sugar that is the calories in the apple is being diluted. If we take the sugar and we added the water back in and we added the fiber back in, we would mix it up and we would have something. We'd have something of the consistency kind of the apple. It would be mildly wet. It would be small if it was one apple, and it would taste sweet, but it wouldn't be as sweet now because we've added the fiber and the water, and we've added some of the peel back in. So as a result, it's the removal of the fiber and water will intensify the taste as it intensifies the calorie density. So that's how that works.
I like that. Intensifies the taste as it intensifies the calorie density. So we were designed for an environment of scarcity where we always sought out the richest food in the environment, and we're still doing that today. My question, Dr. Lyle, is did the processed food industry know this about us when they created their hyperpalatable products?
No, they had no idea. So people have been creating hyperpalatable products for at least 10,000 years. And so they've been, all they've been doing is that they've been fiddling around and then they put it on their tongue and they're like, wow, that's better. So just by experimenting, they realized that as they essentially pulled water and fiber out of food, they made the food taste better. And that's what they've been doing. So now in this last century, finally now they do know. So in the last 20, 25 years, the food industry has figured out that's precisely what is happening, and that they are consciously and deliberately concentrating the sugar, fat, and salt as basically and as concentrated as you can stand it. That's actually what it is. So if they could sell 1% more product by concentrating the food anymore, they would. But pretty much there's almost no water and fiber in food today. It's pretty much all just sugar, fat, salt. Just enough. There's just so they don't have dried out French fries that, it's fine with them if you have a little bit of water in a French fry and a bunch of oil. So now we've got something that's, I don't know, 2,000 calories a pound or whatever the heck that is. So it doesn't do them any good to dry it out and make it 2,400 calories a pound. It's surprisingly. So it's kind of interesting that we were so much designed for 500-ish calories a pound that people don't literally pick up a bottle of olive oil and drink it. The closest they'll come is take a piece of dried bread, which is 1,600 calories a pound, and dip it in a bunch of olive oil at an Italian restaurant. So they'll soak up 4,000 calories a pound pure fat and put that on top of their dried white bread that has had a huge amount of the fiber removed and had the water removed from the carbohydrate. And so they've got something that, by the time they do that, they've got probably a 2,500 calorie a pound product as people are slurping it up. And no surprise, getting fat.
You mentioned sugar, fat, and salt, and pretty much all processed food and all restaurant food is some kind of hyperpalatable combination of sugar, fat, and salt.
Yep.
But in our natural environment, we didn't eat those three components in food together. So is that a problem for us now?
You bet it is. So you weren't designed to be eating sugar and fat in the same moment. They're not supposed to be in your mouth at the same time. You'll see these in the mouths of young mammals as they drink their mother's milk. So they'll be high fat, high sugar in their mouth at the same time. But as we age and get away from our mother's breast, there's going to be no situation where sugar and fat are going to be in your mouth at the same time. So if you're eating something fatty, like some animal food or nuts or avocado, none of those things are sweet. Okay, and if you eat something sweet like fruit, there's nothing in there. There's a few fruits that have some fat concentration in them. Surprisingly enough, they're not particularly sweet. So acai and I guess in principle avocado is a fruit, but the durian, there's a few things, but they're not particularly tasty. But you can doctor them up, and then you can add sweet things to them, and then you can make them more palatable in that way. But essentially, those are rare. Those are like hen's teeth. Like they just don't exist. They're just super rare in nature. Our ancestors were eating fruits. Those fruits didn't have, for all intents and purposes, had no fat. So when they were eating something sweet, they were not eating any fat. When they were eating something fat, they were not eating anything sweet. Notice a phenomenal concentration of the food that people eat today are combinations of sugar and sweet and fat. I have had at least 1,000 phone calls in my career where people would say, Dr. Lyle, I'm a sugar addict. And my first words out of my mouth is, no, you're not. Okay. Why waste time getting to the point? No, you're not a sugar addict. You're a sugar and fat addict. Yeah, I don't have people that say, oh, well, I just sit down with pineapple, I can't stop eating it. Or I eat sorbet and I can't stop eating it. Oh, no, it's not sorbet. It's some kind of soy ice cream. It's some kind of chocolate. What are we getting into that we can't get ourselves out of? A combination of sugar and fat. Why is that so problematic? Because those are two areas of the brain that they're two different independent pathways to the dopamine centers. And as a result, the dopamine or reward pathway, two different neural circuits being activated at the same time that were not designed to be simultaneously activated makes for a really unnatural and extremely seductive experience. And that is now the common experience of industrialized humanity. So add that to, throw salt in there while we're at it, and we've got the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's, a hot dog is sweet. They put sugar in it. It's high, super high fat, and it's also salty. Okay, so the hamburger it has the carbohydrate of the bread. It will add sweet of the ketchup, and then it's going to have high fat, and it's also going to have sugars in the cheese that are going to be sweet. So it's going to have sugar, fat, and very salty. And that is look at a French fry. A French fry has the sugar that will come with the ketchup. It will sweeten it. It will have the salt, and it will have the fat. So literally, something as simple and innocent looking as a French fry is literally a totally unnatural combination of three different neural circuits being activated at the same time that are not supposed to be simultaneously activated. So it is no wonder that people are trapped under this. This is like that feeling of, if you've ever, going to go lift something out of your grandmother's basement, and you go over there and you try to lift it, you're like, whoa, that is way heavier than I thought it was. It's like, I don't know that I can move that. That's what the pleasure trap is actually like. We were not designed to be moving this problem. If you are here and you're listening to this, you are one of the rare human beings on earth that actually understands that. Okay? Just understanding it, however, as exciting and fascinating and intimidating and enlightening as that is, that doesn't give us a pass. That gives you a chance to have a principled course of action which can get you out of the trap. But just knowing it, people will say, well, I know all that. How come I do it anyway? Well, the truth is that knowing it and executing on it are two entirely different things. And so that's why we have to keep coming back, keep getting reminded, keep listening to new perspectives, and then go into our workshop, which is your kitchen, and work at it and plan, execute, and then hopefully get yourself in a nice groove.
Dr. Lisle, if you had to pinpoint the cause of the obesity epidemic, was it when the processed food industry started removing fiber and water and concentrating food, specifically the refined carbohydrates?
It would be refined carbohydrates. Remember, oils also. So oils got real cheap with the processing genius of the 20th century. So refining carbohydrate and drowning food in oil, as well as being able to refrigerate and keep things, cheeses and milk, etc., these high calorie animal products. All this comes together, AJ, in essentially a never-ending conveyor belt being put. A really creepy movie that is a little bit kind of funny and bizarre. I can't even believe they made it. It's a movie called WALL-E, and where the human beings really don't get out of their chairs, and all they do is they suck shakes. They don't eat food anymore. They don't use their forks. And I remember watching this, and I thought, did these people listen to me? Who made this movie? It's like you're watching the extrapolation of the pleasure trap to the point where the hero, the leader of humans, it barely gets out of his chair and struggles to walk in order to accomplish something, whatever it is. That is a very jaded and very creative human being, or set of them, that made that movie, but also insightful, because we are a lot more like Wally today than we were 60 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was prophetic. I know.
Yes.
Dr. Lyle, you had said earlier that if your nervous system is searching for satiation from a specific amount of food by weight and volume, if that's the case, then if somebody was counting calories or points or weighing and measuring their food, they would not reach satiation, I would imagine.
Yeah, they're sort of dancing around the problem, trying to solve a problem with a top-down solution, rather than this is kind of like, oh, I don't know, the dictator of Russia saying, well, I think we need like 9 million pairs of shoes this year. Like, really, genius? Like, what sizes? And who's to say that it should be 9 million, not 9.1, or what it maybe means 10.5? You know, how do you know? How do you know that the people, this year are going to want more or less of something? You have one with the gold stripe on it. In other words, trying to do it top down, trying to decide top down is it's laden with error. You want to do it bottom up. You want to let the essentially the freedom of your body to tell you what it is. So if we don't weigh and measure, and people say, well, I don't know when to quit. Well, you'll quit sooner or later. Oh, well, maybe it's too much. No. When you're eating whole natural food, there isn't too much, because all that's going to happen is that instead of being hungry 4 hours from now, you'll be hungry 5 hours from now. As long as it's whole natural food, you won't be systematically overeating, because you're going to be eating the nature of the food that you were designed for. It's when you are eating foods that are unnaturally concentrated that your nervous system will get fooled and you will systematically overeat. So the nervous system has within it the ability to do that calorie counting by doing a chemical analysis of the food that you eat. But it's limited in its ability to do that. That's why you cannot eat chocolate cheesecake and drink Coca-Cola and wind up being fine, because you'd say, well, fine, it's 3,000 calories a pound. I'll just eat 2/3 of a pound of food a day. I'll eat my 2,000 calories, and that's what I'm going to eat. It will know that you didn't eat 600 calories. In fact, it'll know that you didn't eat 1,000. It'll know that you ate a lot of calories if you ate that super rich food. But it will probably think that you ate 1,500. It won't know that you ate 2,000, because that's so far out over the edge, it can't scale it. And so as a result, when people eat a rich diet that's too far past what their nervous system can do to detect it, they will systematically overeat. And that winds up being, I guess, one final fundamental. And that is that each of us has a difference in how sensitive and how accurate that nervous system is when we start wandering into overly rich territory. So I have people that will call me, and they will have lost 50 pounds on this program, and they'll still have 50 to lose. And I'll listen to them and I'll say, you know what, you're doing a really, really good job. In fact, they're doing a really good job. But they might be just a little too much rich cheats, and they might be up at 750 calories a pound. And literally the difference between 750 calories a pound and 650 calories a pound, a small difference could be 50 pounds on that person. Okay? Somebody else, all they have to do is get reasonably close. I've had people that were 60, 70 pounds overweight. They did not need to get all the way down to 500 calories a pound. They just needed to get from 1,000 calories a pound down to 750. They just needed to give themselves a chance by getting some fiber and water back into the diet, and now the system re-regulated itself. So each individual is different in terms of how sensitive that sort of calorie counting equipment is. My attitude is, we let the system do the counting. I don't know how strict we're going to need to be with a given individual to get them down to where it is that they want to be. Okay? If you're unfortunate, that you have unbelievable sophisticated, thick, system, and you're going to need to eat basically a whole natural foods diet. That's not most people. Most people need to do a pretty darn good job to have a lot of success. They don't have to do what Chef AJ does. They don't have to do what my friend Jim Lennon does. They don't have to do what Alan Goldhammer does. They don't have to be that good. Some people do. Okay, there are people that need to be that good. If you want to get an A in this, you got to bring an A game. A lot of people can get an A by bringing a B game. A B game doesn't mean sloppy and lousy. A B game in this is an A+ game for your doctor. Your doctor's never seen anybody that's a B player out of our arena. And so that means you're eating the vast majority of your calories from whole, natural, unprocessed food, but you eat some, you eat a few things. You have a little vegan pizza that you bake or whatever it is. So we get some dry carbohydrate in there from time to time, something like that. That's still an awfully good job. But is the majority of your calories, when I look at your diet over a week, am I seeing pile after pile of wet starches? Yeah, that's still a B player. But sometimes those B players, are carrying around extra weight and they're real frustrated. And I tell them, sorry for you, gonna have to, if you're the one an A, you're gonna have to do A work. And so those are the individual differences. But the fundamental principle is always the same, that the solution comes from driving down the average calorie density by essentially putting back in the natural concentrations of water and fiber.
So I guess the important thing is people need to know where they lie.
Yes, and they have to experiment, and sometimes they find out. Sometimes they think. There's an interesting myth out there that people, when they want to rush and lose the weight, and then they're going to go defend it. And then once, if I can only get down to 140, then I'll defend it. I guess then it'll be worth it to defend it or something. This is a cockamamie way of looking at this problem. We simply eat, properly and well and do a good job, and we find out where it goes, and we don't have any idea where it's going. We don't know where it's going to stop. Okay, so we're going to pick a path that makes sense for us. And if it turns out that path over a period of time doesn't get us to where we want to go, then we got to reevaluate. We're going to have to up our game. It may turn out that it takes us better than what we thought we were going to go for. We don't know. These are individual differences. But I do know that if it doesn't take you where you want to go, then we simply modify what it is that we're doing. We're not going to try to trick the system. So I'm completely uninterested in any short-term tricks to get you down to a goal weight and then somehow miraculously you're going to defend it. No, we want to naturally get there so that once we're there, we just keep doing what we're doing. Okay, we're not tricking anything. We're trying to discover a pattern that will work for us. And we just don't know how fastidious that's going to be when we start.
I'm glad you said that, because I have so many people that would come to me and say, well, I need to get the weight off quickly, so I'm going to do keto. And then when I get to my goal weight, then I'll do your diet.
That is a classic example of the cart in front of the horse. That makes absolutely no sense at all. Because if you quote, do our diet, that if it's going to keep your weight at 125, like let's suppose you're at 175 and you say, well, I'm going to do keto and get down to 125 and then I'll do this diet. Well, when you get down to 125, if you're still alive, if you do that and then you eat, quote, this diet, whatever version of it is that you think, I can almost guarantee you that whatever version you eat is not going to have you at 125. It may have you at 120. It may have you at 140. Whatever it is that you do, I don't have any idea where it's going, and neither do you. So now what are you going to do? Okay, so instead, we are going to do this diet in some version that you say, I think I can do this indefinitely. This is my plan to do this indefinitely. We do it until it stops. Okay, if it stops, you're 175 and now you become 145. It's like, and you're like, well, I should be 125. Well, then we're going to have to look at where the calorie density of the diet is still too high. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to find out, what are we missing here in this, and what are we going to modify next? And so I'll go through this. There's successive approximations. So people will some people will go from their conventional diet to, a standard McDougall diet. Then they'll go from a standard McDougall diet to a maximum weight loss type diet. In other words, they may go through successive approximations and they watch their body change in response. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to trick our way to the goal and then try to defend it. It doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. Remember, we're not in a rush. You may be in a rush, but I'm not, because I'm out for you to have a lifetime of success. And so we're going to get there by doing the fundamentals, by putting down the stepping stones that are firmly there so we can walk this path easily and well for the rest of your life. That is the plan. Okay, so we're not skipping steps. We're going to go right through this process, do it right, do it once, and never have to do it again, because once we've arrived, we just keep doing what it is that brought us here.
Great. I love that. And I've heard you say before, I think it was a sports analogy, that people that are successful simply learn the fundamentals and they practice them better than anybody else.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's fundamental. There's nothing fancy about success with most things. In fact, when you see very, very fancy things in anything, whether it's the arts or sports or anything else, all you're watching is combinations of very simple things. That's all it is. I went back and watched recently E.T. I hadn't seen E.T. Since I was a very young person. And it was interesting to watch a young Steven Spielberg, to watch his work and thinking, he was a very young guy at the time he did this, and realizing, he was learning. And I was watching some of his movies. He borrows certain things from, I see him do a trick in one movie and he'll try it again in the next one. He'll find a place for the same kind of an idea. And, and he said, incidentally, that when Schindler's List came along, he had said he had the script for a long time and he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. He knew he wanted to be at the height of his powers before he took on something that complicated. And that's you. So before you have a vegan dinner for all of your friends and family, and you're ready to put up with all the crap behind everybody bitching about it, spend a few years. Got a lot of fundamentals before we take that on. Just start real close to home with the fundamentals that you need for your own success. We start there first. That's a tough job, but it's the most important thing you'll ever do for yourself.
Dr. Lyle, if you don't mind, I have two more quick questions, because there will be people watching this summit. This might be the first time they're ever seeing you. And you said breakfast, lunch, and dinner, big pile of wet starch. Yeah. There are still people that are trying to lose weight that think, I can't eat potatoes. I can't eat rice. I can't eat starch. I'll gain weight.
Right. Yeah. Keep in mind that in our natural history, the best estimates are that our ancestors averaged calorie density of about 500 to 700 calories a pound. The starches have calorie densities as follows. Squashes are down sometimes under 300 calories a pound. Oatmeal is 325. Potatoes are 375. Beans are about 400, and rice is about 500. So the starches run a gamut from the high 2s to 5, and they average, call it 400. So you can see that the starches are actually less in calorie density than the average calorie density of our natural history. That means every bite of starch is actually a win. You're actually going under what it takes for you to actually be super lean and healthy. So the starches, people have, if anybody ever saw anybody gain weight eating potatoes, careful. Look and see what's on the potato. that is where it is the problem lies. The problem lies in the shredded cheese and the sour cream and the bacon bits. It isn't the potato. So when you're looking to at your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, hopefully we are looking at food that is wet and that is based around carbohydrates. We don't want it based around protein, so we don't want a bunch of meat. That has a whole host of attendant problems. We certainly don't want it based around fat, So we don't want a bunch of super high fat foods like cheese or something like that. So obviously, we're going to base the food around carbohydrate, but we don't want to base it around dried carbohydrates because dried carbohydrates are artificially calorie dense. So what are our options? The vegetarian diet is not a diet of vegetables and fruit. That is not what a vegetarian diet is. A healthy vegetarian or vegan diet is a diet that's based around wet starches in addition to fruits and vegetables. That's what it is. And as Alan says, the variable addition of nuts and seeds depends on your personal biology, how much you want to eat, and how much you can get away with. Because remember, the nuts and seeds are going to drive up the average calorie density of your diet. So if you eat handfuls of cashews, don't come to complain to me that you're having trouble losing the last 25 pounds. So this is the center of the diet is the wet starch. If we aim there, we're going to be fine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisle. And the last question, what is the real truth about weight loss?
The real truth, AJ, is that it's more difficult and more complicated than is generally appreciated. And so therefore, it takes some process of study and some real personal experimentation and determination to find our way home. If we do that, we'll find it right here. This is the right path, and this will take you to where you want to go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisle.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me, AJ.